So this week I've been trying to imagine what life would have been like for Jesus had the paparazzi been around. We know and love and detest the paparazzi. They give us all the star pictures we would never see if they did not go to such extremes to find them. The paparazzi earn their keep trailing the stars and catching them at their most unlikely moments. The fruits of their labors are splashed all over the supermarket tabloids. The paparazzi spend their best energies getting as close as possible to the stars. So, as I said, I've wondered what life would have been like for Jesus had the paparazzi been around. I can hear them now, listening to the latest on Judean Channel 2, which is carrying the local TMZ. Okay, now you have to hear this, one of them says. Our man Josh was in Samaria when he caught up with Jesus, and you'll never guess what? He has pictures of him with a Samaritan woman. Now, he was not so close as to know what they were talking about, but it seemed pretty intense. He has pictures of them together. No way. He was too far away to get the gist, but it was pretty intense. Wow. Well, get this, says person number 2. Our man Ace was at the Bethesda pool recently. Dude, there's always a lot of activity there. Well, yeah, get this. On the day Ace was there, Jesus showed up and he completely, Ace did, got unobstructed views of Jesus healing a man. Really? Okay, well, that's good, healing a man. No, wait, the man had been crippled for 38 years, according to our sources. And when Jesus got done with him, he picked up his mat and he walked away. Wow, that's page 1 stuff, man. Well, listen, said the third, those are good stories, but listen to what our guy Chaz has from Galilee. Can anything good come from Galilee? No, seriously. A massive crowd gathered to listen to Jesus teach. They were on a hillside, kind of a natural amphitheater, and Jesus begged bread from some kid. And I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but that kid's lunch fed an entire crowd. They estimate 5,000 men plus all the rest. Does he have photos? Oh yeah, he's got photos. I realize it's hard to authenticate a miracle with still shots, but can you believe this? Well, we have to keep somebody on Jesus' trail. If he's crossing cultural lines and if he's healing people with incredible needs and is feeding the masses, who knows what he's going to do next? For sure, we have to capture it on film. Well, for sure, somebody has to be there to experience, for sure. And just come to think of it, who is this guy? I'm honestly not sure the crowd around Jesus and the Pharisees got it any better. There they were in Jerusalem at the time of the Feast of the Tabernacles. The streets were crowded with all kinds of out-of-towners. That's when some in the streets thought they first caught a glimpse of Jesus. There was word on the street about him, all right, even without the tabloids. Word of mouth was that Jesus was in town. And that's when people began murmuring and muttering and whispering in their best low voices. They were talking with each other as they thought they caught a glimpse of Jesus. And this undercurrent from people whose eyes were fixed on him when they did see him, and they said, "Is this not the man that they are going to kill?" Okay, it's time for a little backstory. People don't have search warrants for them and prices on their heads without a reason. As we consider what Jesus had done, teaching, healing, feeding, it doesn't sound as though he had committed any capital offenses, but maybe you don't know the Pharisees. Part of their deal was keeping the law, and Jesus was not always famous for keeping the law. He healed on the Sabbath. They said the law did not allow that, and a righteous man would not heal on the Sabbath. They didn't like the way Jesus dismissed local customs either. The woman came to the well at midday because that's when no other people would be there, no men especially. She wasn't supposed to have contact with a strange man. Jesus wasn't supposed to have contact with her. After all, she had a sordid past. And not only that, whatever he told her set her on fire so much that she went back to town and told everybody she had met the Messiah. The Pharisees didn't like that either. In short, the Pharisees were running the show, and Jesus threatened them. The Pharisees depended on the locals for support, but the locals had stars in their eyes for Jesus. If matters continued the way they were going, the Pharisees' power base was in trouble. Things could get totally out of control. They would no longer be in charge, and that could not be. So they put out a contract on Jesus, and word about that got out. It wasn't just the locals who knew about it. Now the out-of-towners have gotten word about this contract. Their only question was whether they had fingered the right person when they saw him in the crowd. Is this not the man whom they intend to kill, they said. And then they really put the screws to the Pharisees. They said, and look, he's speaking publicly, and the Pharisees are saying nothing to him. The rulers don't even know that this is the Christ, do they? Do you know how you make an angry Pharisee angrier? You blab what you think you know, and that's precisely what they did. These men on the street said, we know where this man is coming from, but whenever the Christ may come, no one knows where he is from. And with that, they impugned the teaching integrity of the Pharisees. If anyone was to know chapter and verse about the Messiah, it was to be they. But the common folks no longer thought the Pharisees knew what was happening. It was a wild day in Jerusalem. The masses had begun to make themselves heard. The curiosity was at fever pitch. The silence of the Pharisees spoke volumes. The only one we have not heard from at this point is Jesus himself. But when he speaks, he says, you both know me and where I am from, and I have not come of myself. But he who sent me is true. Of him you both know. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. Now you might say, do you mind repeating that? It sounded a little bit like gibberish, and I didn't get it all. I'd like to get this down for the tabloid, you know. We'd like to know where you are from, but you've come from him who sent you. What does this mean? What's the gist of this? And you realize that the people there knew where Jesus was from dirty, dusty, out of the way. Everybody comes from there, but nobody goes back to there, Nazareth in Galilee. Indeed, can any good thing come from Galilee? This Jesus certainly didn't come through the accredited rabbinical schools. He wasn't trained in Jerusalem. He wasn't mentored by the rabbis there. Oh yes, they most definitely knew where he was from. He didn't grow up in Jerusalem, and he didn't belong there. But as for the coming from one who sent him, what was that about? And that's what set the Pharisees on edge, because they were beginning to get the picture. He was from Nazareth, but he was implying that he came from God. He who sent me is true, whom you don't know. And with that, Jesus just upped the ante. What happened as a result? The Pharisees tried to get their goons to cuff Jesus and get him off the street. They couldn't do it, however. Something about it's not being the right time. All this while many in the crowd were deciding to cast their lots with Jesus. In effect, they were saying, I'm not sure if this is the Messiah, but frankly, if the Messiah were here, I can't imagine he's doing anything any more spectacular than what this man has done. I like him. I believe him. I'm going with Jesus. The Pharisees sent their goons back onto the streets. They wouldn't take no for an answer. Do whatever you can, whatever you must, whatever it takes, but bring Jesus back here. But they couldn't stand these sniveling out-of-towners who were fawning over Jesus. What in the world did they know? And then there was Jesus. He couldn't leave well enough alone. He proclaims, for a little while I am with you, and then I go to him who sent me. You shall seek me, but you shall not find me, for where I am you cannot come. And there they are, more references to God. God sent Jesus. You see Jesus and you see a route to God. How convenient, thought his enemies. You see, Jesus was making it extremely difficult to find middle ground. Either you sympathized with the Pharisees or you sympathized with Jesus. Either you recognized that Jesus and God were the same, or you did not. Either you took Jesus at his word or you refused him. You put all your money on Jesus, or here was what was going to happen. It was one thing to like Jesus, to respect Jesus, to enjoy Jesus. It was one thing to pick up a tabloid at the supermarket that had Jesus' face on it and say, "This is cool, I'm taking it home." It was one thing to go to Jesus' concerts, everyone was going. It was one thing to appreciate Jesus, to relish the thought of listening to Jesus. It was one thing to buy Jesus' bestsellers, buy his records, plug into his podcast. You could embrace the cult of Jesus in a dozen different ways, 100 different ways, but if you didn't believe what he said, none of the rest mattered. Jesus committed a cultural faux pas, and we think it's great because we believe he should have talked to the Samaritan woman. Jesus healed the man who had been crippled for 38 years, and he did it on Sabbath, and we think that's right because why should the man have waited another day? Jesus fed the multitudes with almost nothing, and we are standing on our seats applauding him. This is absolutely the best stuff we have ever seen. We go crazy for Jesus. We put on the t-shirts that say, "Jesus is my homeboy." But Jesus is telling the crowds in Jerusalem that it all comes down to this. Jesus comes from God the Father, and he will return to God the Father. He and the Father are one. You see Jesus, you see God. You choose not to believe Jesus on this point, and nothing else matters. This morning, it doesn't matter how many Bibles you own. Doesn't matter how good your Sunday school attendance has been. You can have given the church your entire treasury. That's nice. You can be known by the man on the street or the woman on the street as a church-going, God-fearing person. Fine, that's terrific, except if you've not committed your life to Jesus, it means nothing. On this day in Jerusalem, Jesus put the crowd on the knife's edge. In one way, it looks like we're pitting the crowd versus the Pharisees, and we like that. It's convenient to see the story through that lens. Us versus them, good guys versus the bad guys. We want to sign on with the team that wears the white hats, all that. Jesus, though, tells us it doesn't matter whether your name tag reads Pharisee, class of 6 BC, or member of Jesus' first catechism class. You have to believe that he and the Father are one. You have to believe that he entered this world for your redemption. You must trust that the cross is the only thing that will save you from death and hell. You must trust that his resurrection, which he promised, is what gives you hope. That and nothing else. The Pharisees are not done discussing Jesus or what will be done with him. Where does this man intend to go that we will not find him, they said. He's not intending to go to the dispersion and teach the Greeks, is he? The Jews were being scattered all over the countryside, and that was one possibility. What is the statement that he said, "You will seek me and not find me. Where I am, you cannot come"? They weren't discussing. Discussing is what they did best. So on one side of the city square, you have the thoughtful townspeople and the out-of-towners who are slapping each other on the back and giving each other high fives. They love to see the Pharisees taken down, and they have seen them taken down. Nothing like David slaying Goliath. These guys are all for Jesus. Where are the Jesus t-shirts and the pennants? the Jesus keychains and seat cushions. They'd buy the vendors out of business. That's how they would show people what they believed, that they really, really, really like Jesus. They would own all this Jesus stuff. Only none of that would bring them any closer to Jesus or to God or to real life or to heaven. Because you don't ride to heaven because you're in the right parade. You don't get eternal life because you've purchased all the right merchandise. You don't know redemption because you decide, I like Jesus best. You get there by the grace of God, and that's a gift, the love of God that is embraced by faith alone, and even that is a gift from God. And you get there because you trust in Jesus, his Son, the Son, and you know he's God's Son, and you get there because whatever else happens, you've put yourself on the line for him. It's a hard passage. I guarantee this passage isn't as much fun as the pool at Bethesda or the feeding of the 5,000. Good times. But Jesus has a point to make. And what he says here foreshadows the cross, death, and resurrection. He tells us if we don't follow him, we are just skimming the surface. If we follow Jesus, it won't be like the paparazzi. It will be because we are on our knees. It will be because our hands are outstretched to him. It will be in utter humility. We will follow the man whom some wanted to kill and others wanted to make king. We can call him homeboy Jesus or our best friend or anything else in the world, but Jesus presents us with a knife-edge decision. And if we follow him, it will be because we know him as Savior and Lord.